Hello. Welcome to another episode of Ball Over Passion. I am your boy at George V_AFC, and we've got Curran here to discuss the Arsenal versus Wolves game. This is a fun one because we get to talk about projections. We maybe can go into a little bit about what this game means in terms of, having a bookend of the season, but, it was really good to end with a win. And, you sit at the top of the table right now with a 5 point gap. We can talk about what that means for people, what that may mean for our season. But, first things first, it's really, really dark outside, but up here in Canada, we've got snow. I don't think you can see anything, but I'm gonna try to do this. But
you cannot see the snow, no.
You can't see the snow, but we've got snow, so we're here. I don't know what it's like down in England. What's the weather like down there, Kurt?
Raining, a lot of raining. It's been a crappy day, let's be honest. A lot of, for me, just a lot of tech problems. It's been a very long day. I've watched this game 3 times now. So if there's anyone who actually can talk about this game, it's me, because I've watched the damn thing three times. But yeah, apart from that, Chris, days have been better, mate. Let's put it that way. But a really good win, guys. Let's be honest. I think going 5 points clear, I don't think any of us expected that. Especially, I mean, when we talked on the preview, obviously Brentford had already played, and yeah, just 5 points clear at Christmas. It's just mad to say, and we will get into it. We'll get the Grinch here to talk about why we're not in a title race yet. But
yeah, no. Apparently, I'm the negative one.
You're the negative one.
When I have a look at really everybody's ideas, everyone's in title fever is what I'm calling it right now, and that's basically what we're gonna do. But we'll have a talk maybe at the end about what this game might mean. But guys, looking forward to the Wolves game. I'm gonna be honest with you. Even in the preview, I felt like it would be a tight game, and I think that first half really showed that it wasn't smooth sailing. Like, I do feel that the first half and the second half were very different in terms of what kind of a game that we got. I think that we started strong, but then it was really a case of, looking at some of the game, and it slowed down. And then I felt like we were really defending a lot of transitions, especially Goncalo Guedes, my boy. I'm really happy to have a talk about him. And, we got maybe a luck of the draw in terms of some of that offside call. And then we go into the half with a little bit of work to do. But ultimately, the boys kind of really pulled through in the second half. And I thought we played some really good stuff, particularly Gabriel Martinelli, I thought had an unbelievable game. Just generally speaking. And of course, Martin Odegaard, double goal scorers. I think even if he had missed the first one, Bukayo was there. And it was just a really nice piece of play by Fabio Vieira to get him involved in there. But there's a lot of little highlights to talk about. But first, I'm probably going to go to you, Curran, mate. Like, we're going to have a look at the lineups. When the lineups come out, I think there's never a surprise from an Arsenal perspective about how we're going to go. Unless there's an injury, we basically know the front line. And the only debate kind of is when you're having a look up top is who would have Wolves played in terms of, Chan Lee as a striker, or were they going to do Adama? And they basically went kind of this 5-3-2. They really tried to have a low block. I think Nelson Semedo coming back in from injury was super important for him, because we did mention in the Wolves preview that, they had a little bit of a lack of firepower and mainly outlet play. And, if they didn't have that on the right, they would find it to struggle. But, Semedo was able to come in, and, that Semedo cross to Goncalo Guedes, that switch to the left that we talked about in the preview, really gave them kind of their only real scare in the first half. But mate, what did you make of kind of the lineup in terms of, Adama basically coming in? Were you at all scared, or did you feel as though that, when you had a look at it, they might sit in a low block and we might have to pick our moments?
I always find funny is when George asks a question, it always ends with what he actually thinks. It's because it's true. Basically, yeah, you're right. They did decide to sit in a low block, and that's exactly what I thought. I mean, that 5-3-2, and the funny thing is at the before the game starts, I released the lineups on Twitter. I just put up like a little mock-up. People were saying, "Oh, Adama will be on the right," and I was like thinking in real time, Adama will be on the right, won't he? And when you actually looked at it, Adama was more central and even towards the left in the game. It was a weird sort of, like, he was more central, but he was used to, I think, attack the centre backs, and we'll get into it in terms of their press, because it was interesting, and I've got some mock-ups of it. Eventually, we'll get into it. But the main thing for me was in terms of getting The ball through the lines. There's a couple of build-up structures that we talk about in general on the show, and I think the adjustments that I'll bring up are very key in what we were doing, because we have obviously the 3-2 build-up, the 2-3 build-up, but they have different formations. They have an adjustment we made for Erdegaard. There's a lot of different tactical things we can discuss, and we will do. But the thing is, with this game, very much a game of moments in terms of being able to break down that block and get into areas where you can really attack the play, especially in wide areas. We as someone was one of the Wolves fans who was at the game was talking about how in the game warm up, the players were making the same runs. All eight outfield players were making the same runs. That out to in wide fullback centre back channel run, and it was going to be a thing that everyone was going to do. Everyone was going to make that run. Everyone was going to be vigilant to making that run, and we saw it in the game. Like
Yeah.
this was something that we trained a lot, especially in the wide areas, making sure that we attacked that wide channel. And we mentioned it. We've mentioned it since like Leicester last year, haven't we, George? We've mentioned it. And the amount of times we've talked about how you have to hit that wide channel. That ability to hit in wider areas is what helps win us these games against low blocks, because you exploit the space behind the fullback, and you really understand how to get the ball into places where you can take advantage of the space. So yeah, that's the main
No,
thing.
no, of course, and look, Guides, I'm never going to stop praising this boy. He's my biggest what if. I've talked about it on Twitter so many times. I've been telling people this is a boy I really believe in, and in terms of a weapon, we kind of really saw the impact of what he could be. He's just a supreme transition threat. He makes really great decisions. He's really strong in the dribble. He's got excellent technique. I think back in Spain they used him even as a midfielder, which for me was just something that he wasn't really his trade, but he was so technically accomplished. He's able to do that, and if you can tweak some things in the final decision making process, you've got yourself a serious outlet threat. That is not just somebody that is maybe an off the ball expert. He's somebody that can get on the ball, be involved in midfield, and I think there was a lot of times that we saw Goncalo Guedes cause us problems, particularly up the middle, and it really came from a lack of getting in behind our fullback options. And I think ultimately their ability to switch quickly from wide to central areas was the only way that we were really going to have a chance to be got at from a Wolves perspective. But I think if Goncalo Guedes even had a little bit better shooting technique on, he gave us some more scares even beyond just the offside goal. I mean, there was times in the first half that he's got a really quick shot off, and it's always rising, but he gets in a good area and he does ask questions of Aaron Ramsdale. But I think the first thing that we'll probably talk about is just what is it like to break down that kind of back line? And I think last year I'm really thinking a lot about the back three and kind of the impact. And I remember Brighton. I don't know if anybody was here on BoP, but we were really critical of kind of Alexander Lacazette in that game, not being able to pull from
Yeah,
central areas to make runs in between the central center back and kind of the third center back. And what we saw all game, who was super important, and I don't know if people was going to give him his praise, was Gabriel Jesus. I thought was phenomenal in this game, particularly off the ball, dragging markers, because Wolves did set up quite purposefully in a very deep block. And I kind of do agree with Tyler here in terms of Neves not having the greatest of games, but regardless, they had a really tight distance between their midfield and their back line. And so regardless of them maybe not being able to break out with speed in the same way, they definitely tried to use the Unai Emery approach with Liverpool, where they had two outlets up top with Adama and Guedes. And I guess the theory was that they were going to try to break quickly in behind our fullbacks because we would press high and they would ask a lot of Gabriel and William Saliba. And, speaking of Gabriel, I thought he had a phenomenal game. Gabriel was definitely somebody I felt did better of the two center backs. He definitely closed down his markers. And when it's channel defending, he is able to do that role. But first, let's have a look at kind of Wolves in terms of what they offered. And so, again, just a review for everybody. You had Jose Sa, and then you had the wing backs in Bueno and Semedo, and then the back three of Collins, Kilman, and Gomez. And they had a midfield three of Ruben Neves, Matinho, and Bertrand Traore. And of course, they had Adama and Goncalo Guedes up top, while we had our kind of unchanged lineup of what we know to be. And so, Curran, firstly, when we're having a look at it, we'll talk about the Wolves press and then kind of how we maybe responded. And so I'll pull up the tactical board, I'll explain it a little bit, and then I'll have you maybe go for it. Because I think they had kind of a lopsided press where for me, Neves wasn't tight to Martin Odegaard in the same way. Like how you've drawn it, I felt was pretty pertinent because they kind of opened up a little bit of their defensive line where they definitely were worried about the threat that we offered. And I think Gabriel Jesus and Granit Xhaka were super important in terms of pushing that back line deep. And this has been a common theme, by the way, not just with Wolves, but if you guys think back to Chelsea, where their front kind of six in their case was a little bit higher than their back four, and there was space in between the midfield and the defensive line. So when you have a look at it, Curran, for their press, they definitely tried to crowd out Thomas Partey. They didn't go man for man; they went zonal. But I think that who was super important. We'll talk about the solutions, but that right hand side triangle was really important in terms of making sure that we could break out, and of course, when Zinchenko would become another option in the middle of the park, going from that 3-2. You basically kind of saw Thomas Partey having a little bit of reduced options, but Wolves hoping to at least cut that line. How did you feel Wolves did in a pressing sense? Because I felt that they had a lot of really big distances between their midfield and their back line that they weren't able to close. And I think Arsenal were comfortable defending in the halfway line, but I think there was just way too much space between their back three and kind of their midfield three, really. And I felt that Neves wasn't doing a good job um, going deep and calling to make sure that Bertrand Traore and Moutinho kept their distances deeper because Granit Xhaka and Jesus were pulling them all over the shop. And it allowed basically space in the half spaces, right? Like, I think that was really the biggest issue from a Wolves perspective. And what was really great for us, and, Martinelli in the first 5 minutes, you could really see that kind of go. Granit Xhaka's high, exactly how you see in the tactical board. And Martinelli drops a little bit, and in this little rotation, we've got Zinchenko holding the high and wide option, but he makes a beautiful run. And look, Gabriel Jesus is kind of a couple yards offside. That's fine, but him doing that in the first 5 minutes really opened up the back three to kind of push them deeper. And Kilman and Collins weren't comfortable stepping up the line with Neves, and it resulted in a ton of space. And so even if Gabriel Jesus does really well to finish, which was excellent by the way, that was just such a good finish off the stop. I hate that it was pulled back
Marginally
because he really
offside,
needed
yeah.
that for confidence. But I just wanted to highlight that run because Jesus pulls on the outside of Kilman. We've got him central here just to give you guys an idea of what the basic structure was. But Jesus really pulled in between that center back and in between the third center back of that back three. And Granit Xhaka was doing a really good job as well, pulling high and wide. And Zinchenko found himself occupying some wide areas to allow Martinelli to be a lot more central. I think this is one of the few games in recent memory that Martinelli was so central. And of course, the narcissist in my back is saying, haha, central Martinelli is always better. But Current, I'll go to you first. Did you feel that Wolves were aggressive enough to their wide spaces to
Yeah.
stop this, or at least in the middle of the park? Why is it that they found so much trouble?
I mean, there's a couple of things, and I want to have a discussion on this. I don't want it to be a monologue. So, for me, this was kind of reminiscent of kind of a Red Bull press in a kind of a worse way. They kind of wanted to be very centrally compact, rush your build up, and try and get through the lines. I don't know if you found that, but it was sort of, because they have the Red Bull structures, that 4-2-2, very aggressive to your markers and try and find the space. I think that was the theory here. I think the theory was meet your marker high, try and press their Gabriel Saliba, or get the ball into areas where they have to make a decision in the first phase, and there wasn't an ability to do that because we were so good in terms of our build up and getting out of feet. And yeah, I mean, I think the theory was to, from a Wolves perspective, was to make sure that if you're going to bypass us, you're going to have to get out of you're going to have to cut off your six, basically. We're going to cut him out. You're going to have to play around us and find your half space men. You're going to leave that bait to open, and then try to, if you go long, we'll try and play through our lines with Xhaka. We can either intercept the ball with Traore or go in the air with Collins on Xhaka or Totti on Odegaard and try and cut out that route. I think that was the theory. In practice, we just passed around them. And basically, we were able to get the balls, as you mentioned, in the half spaces. And if you look, for example, for the second goal, which we will talk about, that all comes from Vieira making that run inside behind. making getting not the first, sorry, not the second, sorry, the first goal. Vieira making that run beside it, behind the fullback, and Jesus coming inside and playing that ball into Vieira for the cutback. And I think that's a perfect way to illustrate what the theory behind our attack was. But in terms of their pressing and keeping the distances high, they were able to basically try and keep the distances small up the pitch and keep the distances small down the pitch, but the spaces between those two lines was too much. And for the half space operators and the wingers we have, the ability to hit that into out to in run and have your half space players come wide or even overlap, or the fullbacks overlap or come inside. There's too much strength out wide to be able to do that consistently and expect to get away with it. And we eventually
Yeah,
broke that down.
I mean, look, ultimately for me, they had a chasm in the front five and the back five, and it just was
Yes,
something that they struggled really simply with
but I
all
think that was
game. And
by design.
when
I
you
think that
had
was
a
by
look
design, though. Yeah.
kind of what we did at times to kind of open up Thomas Partey, who was marked. Again, I think really the initial press was something like this, and how we tried to look to solve it. At least there was two ways. If you were kind of building down the left, we really saw this Zinchenko, which we've talked about here on the channel quite a bit. This is really our solution to when teams want to stop progression through the middle. But I think like your spacing is actually really smart, because this is the problem that Wolves had, and it was this big. Like I felt that there was such a chasm between their midfield three and the back three that it basically left open a lot of space in between the lines for both Xhaka, Odegaard, but also anybody in that space just in behind Bertrand Traore and Neves. And I think a lot of it has to go down to Gabriel Jesus. And again, that early run in between the center backs meant that Collins and Kilman weren't comfortable stepping to their markers. So here, ideally, you'd like Collins much farther up. You'd like Samido much farther up, much more aggressive. You'd like Kilman to be stepping up. Toddy, this line is far too back. And this was a case really for quite a bit of the game. And, I feel as though that Zinchenko was really doing a good job making himself an option in the middle of the park, but we're comfortable building wide if you guys stop the center of the pitch, right? Like that for us is no problem. And when we built through the right, which is a little bit different, that kind of access between the Odegaard, White, and Bukayo Saka triangle that we've seen so often, it was excellent, right? We were moving the ball at really quite a lot of pace, and I think Matinho wasn't aggressive enough to the markers, and I felt as though Ben White kept joining, overlapping, which he's done all season, to join as a kind of a sixth lane to push Bukayo Saka inside, but then Martin Odegaard would sit in that half space and he'd be open for a really nice half space cross or be able to dictate play, because Moutinho and Bueno weren't breaking at pace, and they weren't going to do that, and so it actually suited Martin Odegaard to have that physical battle, because if he was going to defend transitions like that, I think that Wolves would have been far better getting a little bit more of a physical presence to do that role, because if they were going to keep these distances to be so big, then they were always doomed to fail, and I think that for me was really the frustration from maybe a Wolves perspective. But from an Arsenal perspective, this little triangle was excellent. And I think that we were seeing it really all game. And then, just to kind of have a little bit of evidence in the pivot, once again, that front kind of five, there's just far too much spacing. And I don't think that the center backs felt comfortable, because Jesus was
But this is
making runs
rest
off the
defense as well.
ball
This
in
isn't even
between the
press.
center backs.
This is rest defense. So this is not even the press. Even in your press, you're in that pentagon formation and you're not marking anyone. There's
Yeah.
no mark. You're not attacking your marker. You're not going to the ball. You're not attacking. You're basically sitting back and hoping that the ball somehow finds your way back to you. And you see Vieira here showing for the ball. You can see him asking, "Look, I'm in space. I can release to Zinchenko. I mean, not Zinchenko, Martinelli. If he makes that run, or we can come inside and combine with Jesus." There's so many different options, and you'll have to have five players marking one person. It's not feasible and it's not doable, and it's not sustainable, and you will get broken down eventually because of the players we have in wide areas. So yeah.
No, absolutely, and I just think that, for example, here, like Bertrand Traore is very lackadaisical in terms of meeting Zinchenko, and I think when you're here, if you're kind of backline, and of course Ruben Neves here, he's not aggressive enough to support Traore. Like if Martinelli is going to be the one that's going to be dropping in, and the ball is in play down there, he needs to make up the yards to make sure that Collins doesn't have to follow him into midfield, because this is what was happening, right? Like Collins was caught in between two minds. Do I follow him that deep And then Martinelli would end up picking the ball in the middle of the park, and it wasn't just Martinelli. It could have been, Martin Odegaard. It could have been there was at times that Gabriel Jesus would drop deep, and we'll talk about it, kind of for the goal. But really, I felt in that first half we really built towards the left, and we kind of banked on the fact that Ruben Neves wasn't making a big enough effort to cover ground laterally between both sides. I think in that pivot, it's definitely something that kind of highlights what you really need in that middle of the park. Again, I hate it. I get called a P&P merchant, but fundamentally, this is what happens when a technical base, which is what it was in kind of the middle of the park for Wolves, it is opened up with large spaces, and it becomes really easy to pick them apart when you're not super aggressive to your man and you're not 1v1. So I think that, Wolves were a little bit more wary versus maybe City, because I felt that with City that, if as long as you isolate the Kevin De Bruyne Holland channel, they are a little bit more limited. They're not as fluid changing between wide and the center of the pitch. So if you cut the lanes through the center, they find it a little bit difficult. But from an Arsenal perspective, we do build a little bit more wide than Manchester City, and it really comes down to Jesus's runs. If Jesus doesn't have the verve to really go between Kilman and Collins here, which he does make that run unselfishly, he doesn't get the ball, but this is what killed them in transition so many times. And I think Martinelli dropping deep, there is just nobody actively pressing or picking him up as a man. So he felt that he could switch, turn, and really attack at pace. And I think that's what he did. So just quickly going through it though, Curran, mate, before we get to the goal, there was a little bit of a scare. Goncalo Guedes, again, we get caught in transition in the 20th minute, right? And Wolves are breaking at pace. And Nelson Semedo is breaking. They get in behind our back line, and we're basically running back to goal. And we've got kind of our typical three, but Zinchenko's out of frame, right? And this is kind of where Wolves were always going to hurt us, is when Zinchenko was caught a little bit high and wide. But in the 20th minute, you've just got basically the back three in White, Saliba, Gabriel, and along with Thomas Partey trying to make up ground as Wolves break with pace. But Semedo just drops in Goncalo Guedes in between kind of Gabriel and Thomas Partey. And look, it's a decent shot. I think if he gets his head a little bit over the ball a little bit more, he troubles Aaron Ramsdale a little bit. But this was basically the only threat that Wolves had, and that was breaking in with space. Again, people are going to say I have a little bit of an agenda, but if you guys go back, I think this is a fault of Zinchenko. Like when he does get high up the pitch, he doesn't have the athleticism to drop deep and come back. And
Let's
I
be real.
think it's
The
very
only
frustrating
the main
for
things
me,
that have
at least.
happened in the
Yeah, just really
the
quickly,
main
it's like it's really frustrating for me when I see him high up the pitch like this, and I don't see him make enough of an effort to continue his run back to goal. Because at this moment, Goncalo Guedes, he can either cut back and look for a cutback himself, which he doesn't do. He probably would have been a little bit better served than taking the shot first time. But if we do run into that scenario, we've seen instances where we do break, and that intensity running back to goal, it troubles us. And so when you're defending transitions like that, it's just very frustrating when you see Martinelli, who started higher and deeper. like that for me shouldn't happen. But I think in general the transition we defended it quite well. I mean, I think
we
everybody
did.
crashes really well, and I
Yeah,
think Thomas Partey continuing his run was super important to kind of put Goncalo Guedes under pressure to make him feel like he had to take the shot early. I think that was really important, and so deserves
his
praise.
ability to
But
come
what did you make
inside
of that
is the main thing.
chance? Because I think that was the only thing Wolves had from a threat perspective.
But his ability to change channels was what helped us a lot, because Gabriel came a bit wider, and Partey basically followed Guedes in and basically put him off the shot. And Partey's ability to track runners in transition really helped us there. But the one thing I was going to mention is the main threat in terms of, you can see that throughout the season, has been basically find Zinchenko high and hit that wing. It's not something that we've talked about and said, oh, okay, it's a one-off. It's happened. It's happening at Spurs. It's happened today.
Leicester.
I mean, Leicester. I mean, it's happened a lot. And we're not saying that, I don't think either of us are saying that it's a bad fit for the team or something like this. I think it's a reason you have to be concerned, because teams are exploiting it, and teams, you need to be able to find a way to capitalize on basically baiting that transition open, because people are going to go down that side. If there's a way you can bait that move and then close it and then get the ball back into your own possession, because right now teams are exploiting that. We need to find a way to turn that into our advantage again, and we aren't right now. There's a lot of teams that can hurt us on that side. I mean, we've both said that I don't think there's a lot of great right wingers in the league right now. I think Bukayo is the best right now in this league. I don't think there's anyone better than him that's playing at this moment in the league in terms of a right winger. But there are ways that you can overload on the opponent right, our left, and get the ball through the lines and basically take advantage of what we have, the space we have, like a Kulusevski, for example, or someone like that can get in behind and hurt you in wide areas. So you have to look at that and be sort of cognizant of the not a weakness, but the issues that we are having in that area, especially in transition, because you can't concede goals from one way. I mean, we talk about a lot about on this channel about how you have to be able to create high XG chances that can be repeated again and again. If you're conceding chances that can be creating high XG shots on shot creating actions, for example, again and again and again, that's an issue. It's not something you can take
I mean,
for.
look, fundamentally, we're gonna get caught because it's kind of the nature of who we have in that profile and Zinchenko
Yeah.
operating in the pivot. And I mean, look, the
But what
pro
we
is
did well
I'm not
was the
gonna
channel
ignore the
defending,
pro,
right?
but the idea
Well,
is that
Gabriel coming
on
wide
the
and
ball
Partey coming
value of
in, right? It
finding
was a challenge.
somebody early in the half space is gonna outweigh the transition lack of running power the other way. But the issue is, down the left-hand side of our defense, we ask Gabriel to defend far more in greater spaces than we do on the right. And just because Ben is such an athlete and able to cover both
Mm.
sides of the boxes so well, he minimizes the distances that Saliba has to recover on the right, and it benefits both parties. And so, ideally, I'd like to see that fixed because it's the only con that I really felt Wolves had an opportunity to hurt us in the game with.
There was a kind of fix, but I'm not exactly that, because the thing is we've had Gabriel come wide and Partey fill in chat in the channel, and that has been a way we've decided to look at it in terms of going at the to fill the lane and not have Saliba having to cover both sides. Because Saliba, as quick as he is and as good as he is, I don't think that he has that body on the line defending that Gabriel has. Gabriel is the body on the line defender. He's the guy that you
Gabriel's
can
your best channel defender,
channel
right?
defender, one-on-one defender. It's better, the more aggressive defender, the more the defender that is better in terms of putting his body on the line. Best and better in both boxes. I can go on. I mean, he is the man. We have to have a section on him because he was brilliant in that final game. I think personally, I feel like he's going to come back with a bit of a chip on his shoulder. I think that he's gonna have he's got that mentality where he thinks he believes in these things. He has that wiring where he's got that personality where you can really see that he's an emotional guy. He's not someone he's gonna wear his heart on his sleeve.
Well,
And I think
well,
that
I
you
kind
have
of
to
I
help
want to
him.
critique this because I want us to be very specific about what we mean by 1v1, okay? Because Gabriel is a better channel defender, but
Correct.
Saliba's better in isolation 1v1 out wide. Like those are very different things. And when you're talking about
I
asking
mean,
to
let's
cover
just mention two situations, right? In terms of channel defending, right? Gabriel is better meeting his marker high, in my opinion. I think he's better at meeting his mark. I think Saliba's the more deeper defender that is more that can basically
he's
run
got
it
better
in
controlled
wide areas.
aggression. Let's call it what it is. So it's
Yeah,
basically so the idea of controlled aggression is this idea that you've got a really front-footed defender that can meet their opposing marker out wide and not give up chances to be turned. And that ability to really stop
because
those
he's
threatening
quicker.
situations
That's the thing is, and his
comes
his body positioning and his ability to recover from situations that we saw against Havertz against Chelsea. He got beat. He eventually gets up immediately and gets the ball back. He's very good at recovering from a position. He's very good at meeting his markers, especially in wide areas. He's not someone
well,
that's going to get beaten and
ironically,
get
Curran,
run
like we
behind.
like Curran, we talk about these things, but again, I get frustrated because I just don't think that people have watched Saliba that closely. Because ironically, some of the issues that he's had this season has been meeting a marker. His positioning wide when he gets drawn out of his defensive line is something he similarly
It's
has to
belief.
work on. Like he's been
Yes,
flat-footed. He's had
he's been a
errors
right
at
back
that
for God's
very
sake.
exact passage of play. But what Saliba is super, super good at is if you isolate him wide you're not gonna beat him. He has that controlled aggression, he has that aura, he'll do it.
I'll give you
But
the
what
perfect
Gabriel
example.
does that's very, very different is in transition, if you're
Mm.
asking to defend major spaces, he's somebody that can absolutely cover ground a lot quicker. I think he's got a little bit more intensity running, and that suits the left-hand side where you're gonna naturally have a lot more space because if Zinchenko is not gonna be somebody that was running back with the same authority. You're gonna
Mm.
need your channel defenders to be a little bit more competent on that side of the pitch. So it ends up basically working out that you have this great duo. I'm kinda tired of people critiquing things very specific to each of these players, but not
Which
outlining
is
kinda how they fill in each other's partnership role. And you had a great article kind of on Twitter
thank
talking about kind of who they reminded you of. But I think just generally, there's such a complementary pair in how they defend that people don't give that enough power in terms of what a partnership offers you. And I think that's just a really big mistake because we see it in this game constantly, by the way, because for me, it was a game of transitions, and that was
Yes,
the only time that you were going to get caught from a Wolves perspective. And
correct.
that was going to really lean into Gabriel having a good game. And there were times that we saw that Saliba, I wouldn't say struggled. I think that's really harsh, but I just think there were
He
times
had
that
one poor
Gabriel was
pass, I feel. I
relied
think
more
that was
on.
the worst minute he had. He had one poor pass that let them in. I think that was the
Yeah.
only thing he had. And I'm just gonna sum it up. I think the way the way I described it in the article, and the way I think the best way to describe it is, you have two different situations, right? So if you look at the Leicester game at home this season, right, you have Madison in that right half space, trying to receive the ball in areas around the center circle. Gabriel's hitting his marker high. He's getting the ball back. He's basically hitting that marker, and he's trying to get the ball back and retrieve it. And if he gets beat, he's able to cover the spaces in terms of if there's a winger, for example. I think it was God, who was it? It wasn't Barnes. It was help me. It was who's their right winger?
Who?
Leicester.
Leicester?
I can't remember. It's escaped me. But their right winger can overload on the right side, and Gabriel can meet that marker as well. He can cover the space in big areas. Where is if you look at Saliba's side, if you look at, for example, that first game against Crystal Palace away, and you look at Wilf Zaha, his ability to basically track that runner from wide if there was something happening with Ben, or Ben was high, that ability to recover the ball from wide areas, that's a different situation. That's what he's very good at. He's very good at meeting his markers and not getting beat and not letting the space happen behind him. And if he does get beat, Gabriel can cover the areas that he can basically be that secondary defender that allows you to have that someone be aggressive in wide areas. So their strengths mesh together very, very well. So that is the main thing that I think that we need to get across, because it's not just about, okay, one's great in duels and one's great at passing. No, even in their defensive efforts, they're able to cover each other so well. And whoever who's struggling a little bit, the other one can help. And
Look, more
yeah,
more than anything, just to kind of wrap up that section, I think Gabriel deserves his praises. It's why, like, I'm glad that we had a little section on it. But more than any area of the pitch, the center back pairing is a partnership, and it's not an individual trait analysis. And
why I call it what makes
ideally,
a partnership.
sorry,
That's why I call it what makes a partnership, because defending is not an individual effort.
no,
It's a partnership.
it's a partnership, and in terms of the complementary nature that they both give to each other, it's look, they've talked about it themselves. I mean, not just has Mikel talked about it in literally calling the idea of a partnership being very important, that they complement each other. But I think um, really what is happening right now is Saliba has, um, I think he's somebody right now that is still finding himself in terms of what his role in the team is. And I think Gabriel is just a leadership profile in general, and Saliba is a little bit more of a quiet leader. He's going to be somebody that you'll be in awe of in terms of dominating his role and his 1v1s, but he's not going to be loud in terms of organizing his backline. And Gabriel is going to be that. And he was a little bit emotional. That carries with it a little bit of pros and cons. But sometimes Saliba will be too lax. Like, personality traits, they can be positive and negative to
Look
both
at
sides of the
Fulham.
spectrum.
Look at
Somebody that's
Fulham.
super
Fulham at
calm
home.
is going to happen
Yeah.
where Saliba is going to play an errant ball, which he did in the Wolves game, and it's not punished, but it's an error. That doesn't make it less of an error than, say, Gabriel, who is a little bit too emotional and maybe isn't able to shape the ball to his marker. So I think for me, just to wrap up that section, I
Yeah.
think they were really, really smart defending the channels. They really didn't give too many transitions away. And when they did, I think that, between Thomas Partey, who was also really good defending in this game, they were able to snuff out a lot of chances. And of course, right before we get into the goal, because I think to end the first half, there was really that Gabriel Jesus chance, right? When Bukayo Saka receives in the 34th minute, he's again in central areas.
Yeah.
Matinho is just not able to keep up with him. And I think, again, the Wolves defensive line step poorly and Gabriel stays on side. He gets a slip ball from Bukayo Saka. And look, I think Gabriel Jesus is unlucky. He hits the crossbar in the 34th minute, but that passage of play once again highlights how Wolves were just so poor in their middle third as well as their final back kind of three. And guys, it comes back from Martinelli inside central run. And I hate to keep repeating it because, the little narcissist in me loves hearing that again. But again, Martinelli is drifting into central areas a lot more. He slips in Bukayo Saka, who just takes it on the half turn and he
Mm.
goes. Um, and I think, like, when you have a look at maybe some of the midfield dynamics that we had here, I actually felt in the first half we did struggle a bit midfield-wise to really dictate play. We did work ourselves in transition. We kinda took
But we
what
all
Wolves
no, the
gave
thing
us.
is, I think people sorry, this is the last thing I'm gonna say before we move to the second half is that what I think Fabio that substitution meant, I think the team was over cognizant of sniffing out transitions. I think the team was overly a bit more reticent to really go for it. I think there was a more dog mentality in terms of closing out Adama, closing out Semedo, closing down that those Matinho, for example. If anyone in transition, they kind of they clamped it. Three or four men. Gabriel basically sliding in and getting the ball off Adama. Jesus dropping deep and making sure that we have that ability to move in basically get the ball back and move into areas. I think you saw a lot of Jesus dropping a lot in that first half, just to make sure that we have that extra man in case Fabio's a bit overawed or something. I think they tried to look after Fabio a lot in that first half because I don't think he. I mean, he didn't. I don't think he had a bad half at all. I just think that the team was sort of, like, we need to get him. This is his first sort of 60 to 90 minutes in the Prem, and
I
we need
think
to
we
get him.
struggled to set the
Yeah.
tempo, and again, it was very much
Yeah, I
a
mean, that's
kind
because
of.
the central presence was really drifting a lot deeper than you would want, and
And I mean,
we were
Martin
we were
Odegaard
overloading in
struggled to
areas too
even
much.
Martin Odegaard struggled to find himself in the game. Like, a lot of what was really good was the fact that Granit Xhaka and Jesus were making really unselfish runs, and we tried to open those half spaces a little bit, but Martinelli was just super important. He had an unbelievable game, dropping deep into the left half space, and again, making the central
I
runs, and
mean,
I
it's
think, look,
perfect for the goal. The goal, he I think that's a perfect transition because
almost like you read my mind. I was
yeah,
just gonna
exactly.
transition to it because this boy deserves a lot of praise,
Yeah,
and we'll have a talk about it because he's super central, and we'll kind of bring it up because he was doing it all game. But we get into the second half, right? And he makes a beautiful central run. And so when Martinelli kind of picks up the ball, I'll walk everybody through it. Um, Picks up the ball super deep, and in terms of turning on the dribble, he escapes some pressure. And he does have a little bit of a slalom through players. I think here some people want him to release to Thomas Partey to kind of get rid of it a little bit more, but he keeps up with it, and he's basically now in space on the right hand side. And it just shows, by the way, this idea that Martinelli is left wing and only left wing is a fallacy. He has the freedom to rotate wherever he is, and I'm not going to say it again, but the shouts about having him central striker, he's showing the ability to have a lot more security and contact in the deeper parts of the pitch, but also making really good decisions in space. Because when he does see this, he skips, outside of Neves, who kind of meets him really lazily, and in the end, finds Jesus. Who makes a beautiful ball. And again, Jesus just intuitively knows when
but just
Gabriel Martinelli
quickly,
has
George,
left
on
and
this
he's
on
gone to
this
the right.
action though, yeah, just yeah,
When he's gone to the right, okay, Gabriel Jesus stays touchline left, and he knows naturally to fill in that hole. And again, I'm going to mention kind of what Wohan always says, kind of on the Twitter timeline: when X moves, Y moves, and it's really nice to see the fluidity, and we saw this quite a bit. And I think Fabio Vieira makes it kind of a trademark what Granit Xhaka would make as a run, who
yeah,
obviously had to come off with a really difficult kind of stomach issue, but he makes the trademark Granit Xhaka run. And in this position, look, it's a moment of pure quality. Like, I don't some people were saying, did he mean that? He completely meant that ball, and it's just beautiful final third potency. That's what you're gonna get from a Fabio Vieira, by the way, when he's a little bit more accustomed to his team. He has that quality to make those chances count. When he's deep in that half, he's not gonna make a wrong decision. And I think to kind of force Jose Sa down like that, it's excellent. He gives him the eyes, and it's a beautiful moment of quality. And I think even if Martin Odegaard was to miss, which of course he didn't, he did very well to bury that chance. But
Saka
even if he
comes.
was, Bukayo Saka attacking the back post like that is just absolutely phenomenal. He's been doing it a lot this season, and I think it's why we see a little bit more of an increase in his goal production. But I'm going to get Curran your opinion really first on that goal because there's a lot to talk about of really promising signs, whether it's Martinelli central, the Fabio Vieira deft touch to get it into an excellent chance, and then of course Martin Odegaard finishing with a third man run, but also Bukayo following up and behind in the back post, making that run. For you, what was your favorite part of that passage of play?
I'll tell you what wasn't my favorite part. Leo for Saka, man, he has my FPL points. Leave it for him. We've all got Bukayo. But on a serious note, if you look through that goal, it's a great goal, isn't it? And the main thing for me is obviously Martinelli, but I want to talk about Fabio. We're going to get into it. So first thing is Martinelli committing men in moments where you need to basically create a bit of magic. He commits 3 men in his dribble. If you look where he picks it up, he commits 2 men initially and dribbles past a third. He then dribbles into space and gets the ball across. I don't know where the Zinchenko picking up screenshot's gone, but it has, and we're going to have to deal with that. But basically, he finds Zinchenko, which finds Jesus, and Jesus then finds this ball. And I was talking about earlier about hitting that centre back fullback channel, and I think this is so crucial in doing this. And this obviously is a centre back channel, but hitting channels and hitting space and committing men is so important in low block attacking
Well,
play.
this is the run, right, Curran? Like for me,
Yeah,
we were talking about it earlier on stream. Look, it's Fabio actually making this run. I felt that Jesus did it all game, but
yeah,
look, Jesus finds himself wide because Martinelli's gone inside, right? So he knows that's where he's got to be to fill in, just in terms of just basic positional play. But this run is what Lacazette didn't do against Brighton. What we lacked up top was dynamism off the ball in terms of making those unselfish runs. Look here, Fabio Vieira receives it, and he receives it in a great position to really ask him to do a moment of quality, which it is. It's brilliant quality to kind of play it across the face of goal and sit Jose Sa down because like that's a very difficult skill. It was excellent kind of piece of just um, kind of final third play. Like I think he's just so decisive in terms of what he has to do. And this is Fabio Vieira at his best. Like he's going to be somebody that's going to offer immense quality in the final third and final third decision making. Like he doesn't take the shot there. He knows where he's got to put it on a plate for. And having Bukayo Saka make that run in behind, it was beautiful to see. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, the back post is Bueno, right? Who lost track of
yeah.
him all game. Bueno had a horrific game against Bukayo Saka. But look, I think this passage of play was just really exciting because I think people were getting nervous. There was a lot of really good approach play. We were finding space in behind, but we just needed the deadlock to be broken because the longer that Wolves had this scoreline 0-0, the easier it would be for them to hold on later in the match. But here it was excellent. And Curran, mate, for you, like after you've got an Odegaard finish here, who again, after his second goal, I think he's on his highest goal total that he's had for us on like 6 goals, right?
Yeah.
So um, I think he doesn't do anything special in this passage of play, but he gets there and he's making the run, he's making the forward run, and when he's aggressive and intentional like that, he gets goals. He's shown it so many times when he makes that run, he can be found. And so for me, and well, I guess for you, I'll kind of ask you here, when you have a look at it, what did you make of kind of the Odegaard run? Because I think he was making himself found in quite a bit during that second half, in terms of not just staying in the half space, but being a little bit more aggressive. Like I think we had space, we found him dropping. You had like a great graphic earlier that we talked about the Odegaard dropping into the half space, but I just felt that in the second half he was a lot more aggressive and making sure to attack the box. He wasn't happy just staying deep to defend transitions. He was happy pushing the ball up and making sure that he's making himself an option. So, what did you make of Martin Odegaard's kind of performance?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Odegaard had a very good performance in terms of being able to really affect play in the final third. But what the main thing I want to talk about, and I will talk about Odegaard as well because I think this is a major key. Our front five being able to not block down, break down a low block. There we go. Got it out of my lips. But the ability to break down a low block was so good in this game. And teams, especially high up the table, are going to have to deal with that week in, week out. And what Odegaard does is he makes that third man run, as you mentioned, but he also makes the movements beforehand to create space to make that move, to make that third man run so efficient. Because if you look through, and we can look through, if you look through, for example, for Where is it? So if you look in this picture here, you can see Erdegaard presenting for the ball, but he also goes to he makes that move inside into the box. But look at the space he's in. You can see one, two, three, four men around him, and from this position to find the space and basically hunt that space and be able to find an area in the box. It's down to two things. One, obviously his run itself. Two, Fabio and Jesus basically crashing on that one side to draw defenders out to ball side. And three, also you look at the way that we attack the box. So if you look in this picture, Jesus actually run to the back of that, so he's also able to find space in that box. But making that 2v1 wide and getting Jesus and Fabio, or Erdegaard and Fabio, or the ability to move into the channels, it's able to basically free up the space in the middle by drawing defenders wide, and that's what we were so good at, and that's where this game came from. But the last thing I'm going to talk about on this goal is basically saying the ability for the what was I say, the ability of Fabio to time that chip. I think the delay of timing and forcing Sarr to commit, it's able to really chip the ball through the and get the ball into that area, because if Sarr doesn't commit there, then you don't have the ability to go long and really get that that goal. And I wanted you to discuss that while I just quickly upload something.
Yeah, no, look, like really quickly, look, Fabio, he's still growing into it. I've talked about it quite a bit. I think people confuse when I talk about somebody's ceiling being bigger than other players that they're better right now. These are very different topics. And you're talking about a boy that, again, came into preseason injured. He doesn't know his teammates. And, he's built himself a fitness throughout the season, which isn't ideal. And he's come from a town that he's never left. He's never left the town of Porto. And so he's definitely somebody that you're going to have to grow in. He's a quiet boy. We've seen that in interviews. Okay, and he's still learning the language. He doesn't know the language in a new country and a new team. And I think it was just really beautiful to have Martinelli come and like celebrate with him. Like he needs those moments to influence the team to really gain a perspective of being a part of something. And so I think he was excellent in terms of his final action. He's still got a lot to do to kind of involve himself a little bit more in play, but he's still learning the system, and those kind of runs that he's making, the Shaka run there. I love to see it because I think
Mm.
he showed quite a bit in Porto about being able to dictate play, which is something that we haven't seen here. A lot of people kind of wrongly think he's just a final third operator. He's not. He's somebody that absolutely can dictate the tempo of the match, but he's not asked to do that in this role. And kind of in the left center midfield role, just to really make that run was really smart. It's what Granit Xhaka has been doing kind of all season. And Jesus, beautiful ball. And just really quickly, I'll answer kind of the question from Blaze. When you have a look at it, I'm not worried about Gabriel Jesus. Why? Because he's running. If Gabriel Jesus isn't running and isn't doing these things off the ball to make himself available, then sure, I will be with people about being worried that he's not being clinical. But as long as you've got a striker that is making those runs, he is what destroyed Wolves all game. And just really quickly, Blaze, like I would retort to people if you ever had a critique of Gabriel Jesus' performance, I think it was one of his best this season. You actually have a look at it. He is responsible for pulling Collins, Kilman all over the block the entirety of the game. His
Even for
unselfish
the
run,
goal,
again,
if
between the
without his
central
ability
center
to
back
find
and that third
Fabio,
center
the
back
goal.
is what pulled the line all over the place. And between Gomez, Kilman, and Collins, they couldn't live with him. Look, would I like him to be more clinical? Would I like him to finish the chances? Sure, everybody would like that. But if you're making the off the ball runs and you're still showing for the ball and you're not being afraid of it, then there's nothing to be afraid of from a coaching perspective, because that will come. The form is, just the clinical nature in his form right now is just kind of temporary. And by the way, guys, I think it's just because Gabriel Jesus, we warned about it on this channel, but guys, this has always been who he is. He is not somebody that is hyperclinical. He is somebody that does need 3 shots per 90. He is somebody that does need quite a bit of chances to finish. He's not going to be super clinical, but what he gives you as a striker that moves makes your attack so fluid, both in the center of the pitch, but wide. And that means that your attack is far more unpredictable. And this is what he gives us. And so I think you don't get the space that Martinelli does driving central without Jesus's unselfish runs. Like those are linked. It's not just the action that you see on the ball. So when you see Martinelli breaking through the middle of the pitch, okay, at pace with the ball, you got to see what's happening higher up the pitch, because Jesus is making an unselfish banana run to open the space and the defenders are backpedaling because they're afraid and mindful of Gabriel Jesus' off the ball run, but that gives space for Martinelli to run into. So they're
The
linked.
last, yeah, the last thing I want to say is, in terms of Jesus, look, without his wide overloads, you don't form the chances you get, and especially against low blocks, you have to be able to pull defenders wide. You can't just have them pack the center and basically just try to hit balls in from deep. This isn't 2020. We're not doing Kieran Tierney cross into nobody. We're not doing that. That's not what we do now. We form wide overloads. We get the ball into areas where we can exploit those wide overloads and get the ball into the box via cutbacks or hopefully via maybe even a cross. But the major thing is that ability to pull wide, allow for a Bukayo to come inside, allow for a Marcelli to go central, allow for those horizontal runs that you see. Next game we watch, go to watch this game or watch West Ham when we play. I really, really want to know if people see the same sort of cross-field runs that you see from a Marcelli or cross-field runs, the carries that you see, that they take the ball across the pitch and they can do that because they have Jesus filling in that zone. They have the ability to know that zone will be filled and they can basically try and tease open an opening in that block. And all these runs that you see are so critical if you're going to be a title challenging team because teams are going to set up in that low block against you. You're going to go away to a I don't know, a Wolves, take for example, or a Leicester away or something like that, and they will take these liberties of three at the back, wing backs tuck in, five middle, and you're going to have to play against us, and you're going to have to basically break that down. And if you can't break that down, you're not going to be able to win the game. You need a goal to win the game. I think that's the basics of football, and we need to establish that. But the main thing is you have to have mechanisms that you can break down these blocks. And with Jesus, he provides the chaos and the ability to not only affect the goal in terms of the overloads, but also the pressing and the counter pressing that we see, which I don't think we've talked a lot about. But the counter press in this game, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. The way we hunted them down, the way we went 4-2-2 and went ball side and really attacked. We filled in the lanes. We didn't just go man to man. We filled in lanes as well. We went the far side winger would attack that third centre back and really push high. So the turnovers you create can also create chances as well. So these need to be mechanisms to create that title winning mentality that you have to get into these players because otherwise teams are not going to let you break them down. No one wants to give away a goal. So critical, incredibly critical that he stays.
Yeah, no, and I think look, when you're talking about the MVP though of the season, we've always said it's the press, but I think naturally we have to go in because Gabriel Martinelli's kind of endeavor in the corner flag is what really creates that second goal. So we'll have a
Mhm.
really quick chat about it, really, because again, the Martinelli pressure. Sorry, firstly, let's talk about Thomas Partey's really excellent switch. Which again, he did have an excellent game, particularly defensively. Like he was really good at controlling transitions and allowing us to have a base to basically play so high up. But he does a really excellent switch out to Gabriel Martinelli, who makes him run. And Gabriel Martinelli puts again the Wolves back under pressure. And Gabriel Martinelli then is able to get it. He drives inside, and it just comes back to Wolves not being aware of their runners. And I think it was just a big problem for them kind of all game. I think Lopetegui is going to have to do a lot of work defensively because as Gabriel Martinelli kind of goes in, the fact that Adama Traore is not really recognizing the space that Zinchenko is in is just so poor. But Zinchenko takes it in stride, which is excellent, and he does a cutback, which is a really good one. And Martinelli has a really good shot, and Jose Sa gets down really low, really quick. It's actually an excellent save, and he parries it again into the danger zone. And Martin Odegaard just does beautifully here. To kind of put his head down and release really quickly. It's just all that you want to see from him,
Yeah.
even from somebody that's critiqued him in the past. I just think that he's just been so good in
But this is
at
what we
least in
said
the
when
last
he
couple
was on
games
loan.
being
That was his strength,
aggressive.
finding those zones 14 third man runs. That was his superpower. That was what he was bought to do. That was where he was getting goals in that loan spell. That ability to find that third man run in that zone 14 zone and be able to hit the box, hit that penalty spot, and hit that area where when teams are pushed back, you have that space in front of the block you can fire in goals. That's what he's brilliant at, and the fact that he's doing it and he did it twice at the last night is why he had such an excellent game.
It was, and he goes to finish, and again, we said it. He kind of ended now 6 Premier League goals, one of his highest tallies. And I think,
Mhm.
look, when you have this kind of high press, I've talked about it for so long on so many channels, on so many different videos. Like this idea that you've got an athletic base to go 1v1 with a lot of your press is the key to why we are seeing so many chances that are being fashioned by the team. If you don't have
I'm
that
not sure we have a
athleticism to
low
be able to
defensive
go
press.
1v1, then forget about it. If you don't have the base to really go with your man, forget about it. And so when you talk about kind of the backups that we need to recruit now in the back line and potentially down the line in midfield, you need to make sure that this press can be carried on. And the only way that it can do that is with athletes that are big space runners that are two-way, right? Like it's something that we know that we need. But Kern, I just want to end really quickly on what this means for going into a break. 5 points at the top in terms of the title race.
You go
We
first because
will
I'm the outrageous one here, so you go first.
well, I mean, I'll talk because look, I think everyone's coined me the negative one, which is a very quick turn of fate. But in terms of this is excellent to see, May. This is amazing, lovely to see you from India. I hope you're doing really well. And when you have a look at it, May, 5 points clear, 14 games in. There's a conversation to be had about current metrics. Everybody that I talk to that wants to talk about title projections and stuff loves to cite our current metrics. And I'm somebody that right now is just really enjoying the way that we're playing. In terms of analyzing whether or not a 5 point gap at this point in the season or another point in the season, is that really important in your overall view of a title? I don't know, because I think when you have a look at it, um, leads of up to 8 points have been wiped since March from an Arsenal perspective in top four. When you're looking at the history about how many points have been dropped, not just us, but just in general, the overturn of points. 5 points isn't huge. Is it huge for this team at this moment in time to have that? Absolutely. Those are two different conversations, and they can be mutually exclusive and right. Now, when you're talking about a title challenge for me, there are a couple things that have to happen. And when you have a look at it, there's an opportunity for Arsenal to do something really special here. And it's going to take um, when you talk about investment in January, I always push back. I always say I don't know if the investment that we're looking to push to is going to be value for money. I don't know if we're going to find it. Availability is going to be a big concern. Mikel has mentioned it in previous press conferences. But
Mhm.
what I did like to see was ending on a win, playing extremely good football, making sure that we were able to go 5 points top is definitely a psychological edge that you can take coming in after the World Cup, which I think is the most unique situation that we've seen in sport, not just in football, but in sport. I can tell you from a sport and kind of sporting conditioning perspective, which is just a fancy term for physios, whatever you want to call it. This is something that we've never seen. This idea of a World Cup, a lot of people keep talking about load. Everyone keeps talking, you're too tired, therefore you're likely to get more injured. Guys, there's another aspect to it, and that 100% is going to be the detraining effect. People that aren't going to the World Cup, that aren't playing competitive matches, that are just training in the gym, which is very different from a match fitness intensity perspective. And there is a level of detraining that happens. As soon as 3 weeks, your VO2 max can be decreased. We know this medically. So, this idea that people are convinced that those with the less players at the World Cup are going to show better, I push back on. We simply don't know. And I think it's something really interesting from a medical perspective. We don't know which risk is going to hurt people more, and they're both the same level of risk, by the way. Both lead to injury and both can impact a team.
Look,
But
look at
I
Christian
think
Antonio
really
today.
what you just got to look at, just really quickly for me, Curran, and I'm going to be very clear. You won't hear me talk about a title race until March when we're within 5 points. I've said that on the channel before, and I maintain that generally. It could have been Manchester City. I could be talking about Chelsea's title winning season. For me, a title race doesn't start until March, and then once March hits, and you've got within 5 points of potentially the league leaders, that's when you can start thinking about it. Now, a proper title challenge is one for me at least that lasts well into the late April, and again within 5 points. And I think until you get to that point, you can say yay or nay, did we achieve it? I think we've got the potential. We're definitely somebody that's playing the best football in the league ahead of Manchester City. We're definitely the best rivals at this current moment in time, but there just simply is too much sample for me to sit there and confidently say that we are in a title race. And, I won't say it until March. I'll talk about how great the football's been, and I'll talk about how great and how sustainable it looks. No problems with that. But this idea that we've got 14 games only played of the season, by the way, you've got over 20 games left of the season. You've got an entire World Cup left. You've got an
Yeah.
entire January that you don't know what's going to happen from an Arsenal perspective, from other teams in the league. Far too many factors for me to say that there's a title race right now. I'll probably be there in March with other people when we have less competitions. The Carabao Cup's out. You know how deep you're going in the FA Cup. These things matter. There's a little bit more things there
Europa League.
for me to say. But I'm happy with what we're doing. I think it's phenomenal for a young team to get in this position, and I think just enjoy it. This idea that it's a failure not to be in a title race or to get
No,
second,
no, no, no,
like,
no,
I'm
no, no,
seeing
no. It wasn't
lunacy
that.
because it's
It was
going the
it was a
other
failure
way.
not to win a title. Forget the title race. It was a failure not to win a title.
No,
That's
but again, that's because I find that people are getting emotional, and it's going to the other end of the spectrum though now.
yes.
And that is because I think on one hand you can be very appreciative that we're doing something that not many people expected. Okay?
No one
And
expected. Who expected a title this year?
no,
Name me
they're like
one person.
no, there aren't. And really simply, Tyler, I'll tell you right now, and I've told you in group chats, we are in title racing form, but we're not in a title race yet until March. I don't consider a title race on until March if we're within 5 points. Then it begins. And then a title race has to happen until late in April. That is the definition of a title race. It doesn't matter if you're 5 points ahead in January, February, March. We've been top of the league in January before with Leicester. Like we have historical proof of it happening. For me, I think we're in title racing form. We're in that conference. You can't deny the numbers, can't deny the performances, can't deny that we're the best in the league on form. But again, from a race perspective, they're very, very, very different. So, yeah, that's the biggest thing for me. But Curran, yeah, how do you feel about this 5 point gap kind of thing? And then we'll sign out.
You ready? We're
Go for
winning
it.
the title. We're going to win it. I'm pretty sure we will win it. I think the metrics prove that we have the ability to win it. Look, I think we do win it. I'm not even joking. I'm not trolling. I think we win it because I just feel the way that City are playing right now. And I know you were concerned between between fatigue versus fitness. I think that's the main argument you're making in terms of VO2 max and fitness and making sure the players come back and you don't know the way they'll come back, etc., etc. For me, I understand that, and I think that obviously the ability to have a second preseason, this Dubai Cup, etc. No, that's not going to be enough. I think players will return, and we will have a difficult period between January and in March, as you've mentioned. But the fact is that we've played more Big Six teams than City. We are we've not lost at home at all. We have the best underlying metrics in the league. We have a way of playing that we can actually sustain players. We can sort of sustain the way we play and create points again and again and again. City lack outlets. City don't have outlets. They don't know how to. What they don't know is that they're not being able to find a secondary route of chance creation right
I
now.
will say, Curran, though, I've heard that they have demonstrated in multiple seasons they don't need that to win a league.
But
And
they haven't looked like this. They don't have any outlets, George. They have no
Curran,
outlets.
I'm the one that made the point in July. I
I
I made
know,
this point before everybody
but dude,
talked
in
about it that
previous
there
title
wouldn't be a
title race, they
90
have
to
a
100
Gabby
point
Jesus,
total.
they have a Sterling, they have the ability to get in and
But
actually
Curran, mate, I made
create
this
goals
point
from
back
nowhere.
when nobody felt it was an issue. I made it before it was even talked about. I told everybody City are going through a transition. They're going to have
Yes,
zero outlets. They're all ball
yes.
defeat. We had this I had it in the trust
We've
me,
had
as
this
somebody that made the
conversation. I
point
know.
4 months
But the
ago,
fact
I got
is,
it.
right
But
now,
but what
right
I'm
now,
saying is what people are forgetting.
I
It's a
don't believe
different
in the
way of
title race
playing.
talk. I don't really care about title races. You can have the quantity, but do I feel like we can win this league and we will win this league? I think we win this league. I really, really do. It's just because I feel like there are too many mitigating factors for City to get back on form. I feel like there's the lack of outlets unless they spend in January and get another outlet. It's not looking good for them. They don't have that
I
ability
disagree.
to
I don't
really.
think that's what they need, especially now that they've changed the way I warned
How,
everybody
how much
with
time is
Holland.
is it settled possession, 60% possession, and they can't find that killer moment where they can create that
See, I
chance out
disagree,
of
Karen.
anywhere.
It's defensively that they look worse than us. I think
That too,
offensively,
that too, that ability they've lacked that structure. I think that Kanji,
well, they
Diaz
lack
partnership
Walker.
hasn't
Let's call it what it is
flourished.
because they've had some serious injuries, and of course, Pep has rinsed Kyle Walker for years. By the way,
Correct.
for years, and he's used it to kind of add somebody that is a cheat code in transition to cover for the space that he affords in the middle of the park. Okay, and fundamentally, when you have a look at it, for me, I don't want us to um, kind of look at January as a make or break and criticize
No,
things
I don't
because
think it is.
that's going to be the trouble with this. One thing I'm happy to say is I think it's phenomenal what we're doing. You don't want to upset the apple cart. It's really difficult to do that when
No,
you
I
look
don't
at
think it is.
January
I
editions,
just
and
think
we
that
will
it's the
have a pod
ability.
that really kind of
Mm.
talks about that because I've been
Are we
very
the better team right now, George?
sorry.
Are we the better team?
We're playing the better football. Are we the better
Are we the better
team?
team? No, you know
That's
what I mean. Are we
impossible to
the better
say.
team?
Sorry.
Are we actually the fit? Like, if you look at the squads, are we the better team? Are we playing the better football?
We are playing the better football. We don't have the better squad.
We don't have the better squad, no. But are we? I'm talking about the 11.
No, we don't. No, we're playing the better football, but we aren't quality-wise better. We
No,
aren't.
no. But the 11 we have can sustain a title challenge and has the ability to beat 19 teams out of 20.
Current, if you drop out any one of let's not look at injuries. If you're looking at um, how sustainable this is, again, I'm somebody
Mhm.
that on Twitter has posted the Boxing Day table for almost years now.
I
I'm
know.
really well aware of the consistency of the team, but
Mhm.
I think a lot of fans are struggling to understand that in order to win a title, you have to be perfect. Okay, perfection is the name of the game, regardless if it's 90 points,
George,
88 points,
is it not
100
going to be
points,
a
105.
season where the points total is going to be lower to win the league?
Again, I made the point in July. It'll be 90 to 100, but
It won't even be
point
90. It'll be 85 to 90, George.
I disagree, but
I don't think so, man. The way City are dropping points,
I don't
it's
agree with you. But even if we don't agree, it's 5 points current. Like that's not major. So the point I'm making though is regardless if it's 85 points, 70 points, 100 points,
and
whatever point you want to
look,
put
this
to
is
the
completely true.
title.
I'm talking about very much right now. If, as George mentioned, it's you have to be perfect. Things have to go in your luck. You have to be lucky
But
to
let's put
get
that to a
to win
side
that
current
thing.
because again, I don't like that argument because then it's like you can't you're saying without luck and that's what I have a problem with the consistency part because it's true the squad quality isn't the same and I'm not being negative. I'm
No,
looking
you're
at it
not
from
being
a
negative.
logical perspective for me.
To say that we're not winning the title is not negative.
No, and it's
If
not that we
anything,
can't. I
it's me
see it
being
as a
overly positive.
possibility. I see it as a possibility, but what I'm gonna end on is no matter what point total you have to be perfect, Kurt, and this is the point that I don't think people understand, whether it's 72, 75, 80, 90, 100. I don't care what point total, pick one that you like and you think the title will win, let's go with that. That
Shall we
team
pick
who
one?
achieves it
88. 88, I
whatever
think.
you want, current mate. So that because that's not even my point. I think it's going over people's heads. You pick the point total.
I
I
just did.
always say the person that wins it and gets that point total has to be perfect. Now, when I have a look at it historically, have a team that's been youngest in the league with no previous title experience done that before? No. Um, in order to do that, we would have to break a ton of precedent. And ironically, in order to not get the title, we also would have to break
Very
precedent
precedent. I
from what our
know.
form is. Now, regardless of what you look at it, but what I'm going to loop it back to because we do got to get going. Whether we win the title or we don't win the title, we're breaking precedent, Kurt. This is my major point because I've seen people who are like you but have gone overboard, okay, and said it's failure when you don't win a title. And
Mhm.
then there's people like me that maybe say, I'm not convinced yet. I need to
Even
wait till March to see
yeah.
where we're at. There's too much football to be played. And that's being looked down upon. Fundamentally, they both need to break precedent. And that's the
Yes.
beautiful thing. But I want to end on the fact that what I love is that regardless, Arsenal have achieved their objective this season. And that was
We are
top
getting top
four
four.
and the Champions League. They have already, with 14 games left, and that's what I love being 5 points clear. Just to tie it back to the actual question, the reason I love that we're 5 points clear with 14 games is that we have confirmed Champions League football for a club that needed that. That was the expectation. Can we do more? Yes. Is there a possibility to? Sure. Should we go for it? 1,000%. But make no mistake about it. You've achieved your perspective right now. You've
Yes.
achieved it, and anything more is icing on the cake. So I'm excited to look for it. Um, Current last thoughts, like 30 seconds from you.
Yeah. So the last thing I'll say is that look, I just think that I'm in between. I do think we can win it, and I do think we will win it. I just think that there is obviously, as you mentioned, too much football to be like 100% certain. I'm not saying when 100% winning it. This is it. I think on current projections, and I think with the squad we have, I think we have a really good chance. And I think there's not a lot of things that really like worry me in terms of, oh, if this happens, if that happens. Even if say a Thomas goes down and we play Mo for 2 games, I think that's doable depending on the opposition, of course. Say a Jesus goes down and we have to play Eddie a game, that can happen. Obviously, if you get five, if you, as you mentioned, as we've mentioned so many times on the channel, you have 2+ injuries and for 5+ games and they're all out at the same time, these change things. But I don't think I think the one thing that I've always criticized this squad of is not having that depth at left back, not let having that ability to really be confident to happen if Thomas goes down. I don't feel I feel like for the first time in a while, because we've seen it already, Thomas and El Neni have gone down, and we've still, kept the momentum up and gone from strength to strength. I think there is an ability here to really take advantage. I think every single person that in that squad right now is believing. I think there's that unity in the squad, and in terms of no title experiences, you have 2 players that are locker room leaders now in Zinchenko and Jesus who have been there and done that. And I think that has really changed the dynamics in the locker room. I think it's lifted the standards of the locker room. You see the changes in methodology when we score at the beginning of games. I think Erdegaard has become more
I don't
confident having
question
those
the
leaders around
mentality
him.
for a title
And I
challenge. I
just
want to
think
be
that
really
there's a
clear.
change in the squad. And I
I
think
want to
the progress that has been made is obviously without precedent in either way. But I'm much more leaning towards the side that is looking good because of the underlying metrics of our squad right now. And you can say that might not be as consistent given the wear and tear of the season and the whole fitness versus fatigue argument, and I get that. But
in
we don't know
true
what's going to happen.
one thing I'll just end on, it's not a mentality thing, it's a quality
Yes,
issue for me. And in true ball over passion, I'm sorry, but robots will be robots. We don't really care about the emotion of the title, and that's just kind of where the mentality is from my perspective. But
and I
guys,
don't think
look,
I'm being
um
overly emotional either. We have been playing the best football in the league. I've talked about
no,
our
I'm not saying that you're emotional.
no, but
I'm just saying, like,
what I'm
in
saying is
general,
I push back on the narrative on Twitter that's saying that we can and will win the title is overly emotional. There are tons of metrics to prove that we are at least able to compete and
we are.
really put up a challenge for this league, and I believe we can do it. I really do. I'm not just saying it because it's the motive of the day. I started feeling it in Liverpool. I think that win really shows a sign that we're able to handle those big games. 6 out of 6 at home. We've not played more. We've played less games at home than anyone else. We've been perfect at home. There's a lot of different metrics that you can look at and say, look, this is a team that can do it. Are they
But
ready?
again,
That's what
I
I can
will
see.
end on this because I think it gets lost in translation when you start arguing between titles. We have achieved our minimum projection of
Of
getting
getting top
Champions
four.
League football. And that is
Yes.
phenomenally important from a sporting directive perspective. It's huge for the club in taking the next step. And whether you believe this year is a year too soon for your proper title challenge, or you think that you are in a title challenge, what the Champions League allows you to do is to take that next step because in the summer you do have to buy players that are ready to take us to the next level. You're not buying anymore for top four, for rotation, for depth, and all of these things. You're buying right now to win a league and to win titles and not just compete, but to be favorites in those competitions. So it's a different mentality and it sets us up really well. But guys, listen, thank you so much for everybody joining us. Hope you guys really enjoyed this. We're definitely going to be coming back with content for you guys. We might take a little bit of the break for the rest of the week, but we will come back with definitely weekly content for you guys from a World Cup perspective. We'll have a couple spaces to talk about the January transfer
Mhm.
window and what to expect from that. But guys, I hope you enjoyed everything. We hope you guys have a great rest of the week. Of course, I'm at George V underscore AFC, current at current BOP, and Chris is at CKFTBL. We are Ball Over Passion here on YouTube or at BOP Footy on Twitter. Before everybody leaves, if you guys could drop a like on the video, it does so much for the channel and we'd really appreciate it. But again, hope you guys all have a great rest of the night wherever you are. Much love. And we're ringing in the Christmas New Year with Arsenal top of the league, 5-point gap. What's not to love? So, guys, thank you so much. Have a great one, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye now.
Bye.